The year is 2020, 6 years since we started TEDxLytteltonWomen. And the strangest thing is that in year one, after hosting this event, I said, I'm never going to do this again. The voices of African women are muted on the kind of public fora where debates happen, where decisions are made, where change is effected. The fact that 6 years ago, when you did a Google search of an African woman, you would find not a woman of African soil origin, but a woman from American origin. When you look even today for images depicting an African woman, one of the first images that comes to mind is not a black woman professional in a suit. You will find images of poverty. You will find images that depict the African woman not as an agent of change, but a recipient and beneficiary of change that others are enforcing upon her. There's a beautiful thing about having agency. The fact that you have agency means that you are not captive to the narrative that the world decides that you should have. The fact that you have agency means that you are your own storyteller. I am a storyteller. I live story in the very work that I do, in the very air that I breathe, in the very senses that I have, in every motion and every movement. I, as an African woman, I am story. And so there is a responsibility when you understand that you are story, that you refuse to be scripted by anybody else, and you will be the one to tell people exactly what your story is. I went on a mission to tell the story of African women. Not the stories that you want to read that make you feel Shem. Not the stories that we keep hearing on media about how we are being helped, how we are being developed. I wonder, when will we stop being developed as the African woman? See, the world needs to start interacting with a harsh truth. And we use words like harsh that jar you. But the reality, it is a soft and comfortable truth that we live in every day because we don't have to justify who we are when we wake up. The truth is, we as African women not only are powerful, not only have our own stories, but if you sit back and listen, you'll understand that we've always owned these stories. So we started 6 years ago because the landscape did not give my daughters an opportunity to reflect that amongst the people who live with them, that they are champions. It did not allow them to reflect that there's a possibility that their mother's friend could be a high-powered executive. There was no possibility from what the media was feeding them that they will interact with people in their own neighborhoods who reflected what excellence was. But when you have agency, you're not comfortable with leaving a truth that is out there that doesn't tell you what you want to see. You take action. So in the spirit of action, we decided, as TEDxLytteltonWomen, we would amplify the voices of African women. And we went on a journey every single year to find not the voices that everybody assumes that they're going to see. You see, we decided to start on a journey of the voices that we know when we sit at the dinner table. We decided to find the voices that the friends of our children's parents are engaging with. We decided to find the stories that seem so innocuous, but quite frankly are not only relevant, but essentially the ones that are factoring in for people's lives, what they need to be considering. We decided to go for the stories that were unknown. We decided to go for women that were not popularly known. And we decided to normalize the amplification of the average African woman. 5 years later, 65 voices on the TEDx platform. We think we've done pretty well. But you never sit back and relax because pretty well for last year does not mean pretty well for the future. And we come to 2020, a world that is in flux, a world that is enraged by this whole notion of a COVID-19 pandemic. You see, in February, I already had to make the decision as to whether or not we're going to host TEDxLytteltonWomen. In February, I was like, oh, hell no. And not because we don't like the work that we do, But here's the reality that sometimes it is hard. Knocking on doors and trying to convince people that you need to hear African women's voices seems like a nice to have. Do you know the attitude towards an NGO? You couldn't do anything better. That's why you're doing these things. It wasn't about that. It was about being relevant in the moment. And COVID-19 brought upon the world a reality that we've been struggling for so many years to demonstrate, that there's a need to invest in not just the voices of women, but the placement of women in places that we can create and effect change. COVID-19 on the African continent told us and taught us that the resilience of our economic ecosystems was so fragile because they were so intertwined into the existence of multinational value chains. They were so intertwined into the existence of powerful multinational corporations. And it seemed that we as African women were not part of the recovery strategies that are being formalized. So when COVID-19 hit our shores, we knew, for instance, that we will be having shortages in different spaces. Not many organizations or governments essentially reframed and started to see how we could, as Africans, start changing our local ecosystems, our local value chains. And the most impacted by this reality and this realization was the African woman. You understand not only having agency, but you understand that in the last 5 years, having put African women's voices on global platform, you understand the effect that has had in not just amplifying their work, but ensuring that the right people, the right voices, the right spaces were having an opportunity to engage with that reality. There's something important about having an idea in a space that allows you to effect change. And in understanding the platform that is TEDx and that is TEDxLytteltonWomen, we understood that we had a responsibility this year, not just to convene and to put voices on the table, but to convene, to shed light on a critical issue facing us on the continent today. So while we're going to amplify voices, we're going to remain true to the spirit of TED. We're going to give you ideas worth spreading, but you're going to see a little bit of a mixed program today. Not only are we going to give you some amazing TEDx talks by African women, we're also going to land in this space 4 critical conversations. We're going to land a conversation, ultimately, which is about pathfinding and connecting. Why did we choose this theme of pathfinding and connecting? The reality is, the area of women's empowerment and women's inclusion and women's access lies in that realm where not many people are engaging with it. And therefore, it was important for us to not only engage with the conversation, but to eliminate a different way of having this conversation. See, pathfinders go out and find information. They go out and find pathways. They go out and do things that other people have never done before. But even more importantly than pathfinding and illuminating the way for oneself is an important need to connect. I think we all rejoiced in the last couple of weeks when Kamala Harris was one of those elected to be Deputy President of the USA. Because she said something important, that she's not only going to be the first person there, but she's going to open the door for others to come. We sit back on the continent and we also say, but we've been having it. Already on the continent, we've boasted presidents, we've boasted vice presidents. But the reality is, in a global world with so many participants and so many actors, there are too few women in those positions. So the real journey is beyond pathfinding, it's connecting, linking the dots. This is not a conversation just for women. It happens to be a conversation hosted by women. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TEDxLytteltonWomen 2020.